Hello, everybody. This is Christy Casey Sanders. I am the Director of Digital Marketing Strategy for Meeting Professionals International. Also, its branch, Plan Your Meetings. So some of you probably remember me as PYM Live. I am actually, if you notice on my nameplate, I've got at PYM Live. If you have trouble asking questions through the question and answer app at any time and you still want to be able to interact with us, definitely tweet at PYM Live. That's also a way of us to continue the conversation after this is over. Also use the hashtag GMID16 because today is Global Meetings Industry Day. It is the inaugural one. It started off as a national celebration in Canada. There were also national celebrations that happened in Europe. There was a national celebration that was happening in America. And we thought, you know what? We are only going to be powerful when the meetings industry talks together in one voice. So let's get together, gang. Let's have a Global Meetings Industry Day. So this is a broadcast where we're going to be discussing why the meetings industry needs you and how you can help. And I have a lovely guest that we're going to be talking with today, and her name is Christy LaMagna. Christy, can you say hello?
Hello, everyone. Happy Global Meeting Day.
And to give you a little, her bio is in the full description for the event, and you can read that after the fact. I'll let her say a little bit about who she is. But I first wanted to tell you a little story about how I met Christy. We were at the first IMEX America, and I had been going to press conference after press conference after press conference after press conference. And after every single one, they would ask for questions, and absolutely nobody would ask any questions. And I was the only reporter who would ask a question. And so I got to this session, and it was a session with the U.S. Travel Association, and Roger Dow was talking about the economic significance of the U.S. meetings and events and some other really interesting statistics. And Christy raised her hand and basically heckled him and said, when are you going to get a new one? This data is so old. So that's how we met. And she actually is the only person I've ever met who has the goal of being the face of the advocacy movement for meetings and events. So Christy, would you mind telling people a little bit about why you're so passionate about advocating for the industry and why we need it?
Sure. And sadly, or for better or for worse, that is a very true story about how Christy and I met. And I think heckling is the nicest word you could use for that conversation. He didn't invite me to any of his other talks and hasn't since then. So one of the things that I have found is that in my 26 years of being a planner, as an event strategist, I have been so blessed with the experience I've had, the things that I've learned, and the wide array of skills that I have developed as a planner. And one of the things that's an integral part of my life is networking. And what I find is, and I would have to imagine most of you have had the same experience I'm about to share, is someone says to you, what do you do for a living? And I will say, I'm an event strategist. And they say, oh, you're a party planner. That's so cool. You get to travel around the world. Could you make room for me in your suitcase? I would love to come on your next program. And it's, whereas they're very well intentioned, their impression of what we do is we go to parties, we travel, and that we have a very glamorous, very easy life, and that our career is really nothing more than getting on planes and drinking wine. And I know from my experience, if you want to go to the party and drink the wine, you need to be a guest, not the planner. So I really truly believe that until we as an industry band together and try and change some of the perceptions about us, we're going to have to continue to fight that battle at parties where people say to us, oh, you're so lucky, this is what you do for a living. So it's kind of made me really passionate about not just what I do, but everyone who does this to get the respect that they deserve. So I'd like to help make that happen.
So I wanted to ask our virtual viewing audience to let us know when people ask you what you do and you tell them that you're part of this industry, what are some of the reactions that you get? You can type it into the Q&A. So you hit the Q&A button and then it should pop open the frame and you should be able to type your questions over in the side. If you are unable to do that, then you can tweet at PYM Live and we will be monitoring that as well. So while we're waiting for some of those responses to come in, Christy, can you tell us some ways that you can respond to people when they say, oh, you're a party planner, or oh, that's so glamorous, or oh, that's so lucky?
Mm-hmm. What I tend to do, and here's what's really important, is you can absolutely explain to someone what you do for a living and correct their misconception and still be very polite. And it actually, instead of shuts down the conversation, it opens an even bigger one. So if you were to say to me, oh my goodness, you're so lucky you get to plan parties for a living, what I will say is, it's funny, I get that a lot. But the truth is, if you think about it, 97% of my job is spent planning, 3% is the execution on site. And the truth is, I negotiate contracts. I'm in charge of millions of dollars worth of budgeting. I'm in charge of people's health, their safety, their travel plans. I negotiate with speakers. You know what? I'm the jack of all trades. And if there's a party, I'm in the back of the room, and I don't get to go to the parties, but what I really love is all the details that make the party happen. So actually, I get to do a whole lot more than you might imagine. And that usually then spurs the conversation to, well, tell me more about that. And what else do you do? So it opens a door instead of closes one, but it also helps change people's perception, which is really important.
I agree with you. And I think something too that is we hear over and over again about how this is an industry where the job market is going to continue to expand for the next 10 years or so. It's the most stressful profession. It's been ranked one of the top 5 or 10 for the past several years. And then, so it's stressful. There's a lot of opportunity. People don't quite understand what it is that we do. But one thing that I found has been common is that the people who are in this industry are incredibly passionate, and they're incredibly passionate about their work, but they may not be the best at communicating why it's important. And I think also the industry tends to be very fragmented, so it's very difficult for us to tell a unified story as to, what we mean, because you have different segments of the industry that look down on each other or seem to be at odds with each other, which hopefully on a day like today, we can get past that and work together. But how do you communicate to your boss, say? I mean, so we've talked about if somebody just says it on the street, but how do you get your boss to understand the value of the work that you do?
That's a great question. And I think that ironically, that we as planners sometimes get lost in the logistics. And the whole reason that I differentiate myself, I'm not an event planner, I'm an event strategist, is because my job, the logistics are secondary. The strategy is paramount. So when I was in corporate America and someone would come into my office and say, hey, we need to plan, it's time for the EVP conference, the EVP HR conference. And I said to the EVP who walked into the room, well, tell me why you're having the meeting. And he said, we have the meeting every year. And I said, that's not an answer. Tell me why you're having the meeting. Until you tell me, I can't plan it for you. And he initially got frustrated and said, what are you talking about? We do this every year. This is our annual meeting. I said, but what's your goal? And by educating him and saying to him, I cannot plan this until we have a clear roadmap of what you're trying to accomplish, I changed his complete perception of what it is that he was doing, why he was doing it, and suddenly he had a whole new attitude towards the meeting. He was an executive when the CEO started talking about our annual sales meeting. He's on that board or that committee. He helped educate the CEO. And anytime I meet with an executive, be it an internal client or an external client, I make sure that they don't call me in when it's time to pick the hotel and decide what the menus are. I need to be a part of this from the beginning, because events, when executed strategically, are an extension of a company's sales and marketing strategy. We are not an accessory. It's a three-legged stool. It's sales, marketing, and events, and we are the piece that joins those together. And until you know how to articulate that and can truly explain it, you won't be taken seriously. So I have those conversations when I was in corporate with my boss and now with my clients.
I love the idea of going from an event planner or a meeting planner to an event or meeting strategist. And that's something that we've always really stressed at Plan Your Meetings, because a lot of our audience are people who are learning as they're going, and they may or may not be even called a meeting planner, but to know at the very root of it that strategy, that understanding what the goals are is so important, because if you don't know what your goals are, then you don't know what success could look like, and you don't know how to track whether or not you're achieving those goals. And I think once you start to do that, then you can say, oh, we generated X amount of revenue, or, we used to have an employee turnover rate of this and our retention has been increased. And so we've saved X amount of money by not having to rehire people. And so I think at the very base level, you need to have those goals, but it surprises me that, we focus so much on entry level education, on making sure they understand that, but there are a lot of senior level executive planners who don't seem to track it. And when I asked, they said it's because their boss said it wasn't important. So how do you address that?
Sure, and that's a great question. And the truth is that if senior planners don't think strategically, then it's no less important for someone who's first day on the job to think strategically for them as it is for someone who's been doing this for 20 years. Even more so if you're just learning, you need to train your brain to think strategically. So when I teach a college class, and a lot of the students in the class are new to the industry, and I say to them, this is what a site visit is. So tell me why I would need to go on a site visit, because there's Yelp, there's TripAdvisor, everyone's got websites. Do I need to go on site visits, defend it pro or con? And almost always it's a unanimous agreement by the class that I don't need to do a site visit, that I can tweet out, someone tell me about this hotel. If I go on their Facebook page, I don't need to do a site. So what I say to them is, your boss may well also say to you, you don't need to go on a site visit, just go look at their website. This is not a good use of my resources. So the exercise I give them, and then I say to them, here's a tool that you can use when you go into the corporate world, is for homework, I want you to go into your neighborhood and find a house that's for sale. And you don't need to go into the house, just look at that house. What do you know about that house? And just by standing outside of it, would you buy that house? And so they come back. And the first week the assignment is, yes, I would. No, I wouldn't buy that house. Yes, I would buy that house. I wouldn't buy that house because it's across the street from a school, from a firehouse. It's next to power plants. I don't want to live in this house. And I said, okay, now this week, go online, look at that house online. And if all you knew was that house online, would you buy the house? And they come back and they say, oh my gosh, the rooms look so big, it looks bright. They took the pictures, in the winter so that you couldn't see that the lawn was dead. And I say to them, okay, so can you say that what you see on the internet is reality? And is it enough to just see the pictures? Because the truth is, it could be a beautiful house, it could be on a beautiful street, and one block over is a crack den. So do you want your guests driving through even the space surrounding where you're going? So when your CEO says to you, you don't need to do a site visit, this is the analogy that I come up with. And it helps if you can put some context to what you're saying and help that person not just hear what you're saying, but internalize it and understand it. Again, every little step is a little bit more of a paradigm shift. So I give people the ability to not just say they are strategic, but help you understand the difference between a strategic planner and an event planner. And that usually helps.
I think that's great advice. And I just wanted to remind people who may have just tuned in that if you have questions for Christy LaMagna, you can use the Q&A app that's on your Google Hangouts to type in your questions. And if you are not logged into Google or if you're not able to get that to work, you can always tweet at PYM Live or leave us comments on the page itself. And we will, if we don't see them right now, we will get back to them. But if you're tweeting at us or if you're leaving a Q&A, then we'll definitely be seeing that. Can we talk a little bit about when people kind of have knee-jerk reactions and want to cancel meetings? We saw a ton of cancellations happening from 2008 until about 2010 with the recession, with the focus on the IHE scandal. There's always some kind of crisis or controversy. I think the most recent one is the passage of HB2 in North Carolina and, some of the meetings that people are coming under pressure to cancel that are happening in North Carolina right now.
Yes, and what's interesting is it seems as if there are two camps. Some people that think that meetings aren't under attack, and some people who do. And I think meetings are constantly under attack because every time your executives come to you and say, Christine, we're going to cancel the sales meeting. We're going to slash the budget by 50%. That's the meeting industry being under attack. It doesn't have to be on a particular news station or in the media. It's every day when our events or our event budgets are looked at as superfluous or the first things to get cut, that's our industry under attack. And what happens is, if I have a client who comes to me and says, we need to cancel our program, sales are down, we just can't spend the money, I will say to them, I understand what you're trying to accomplish. And I'm blessed right now because my clients, I've already got them to the point where they understand why we have the event. So I don't have these conversations anymore. But when I did, it was, okay, let's go back to what is your goal? So right now you want to, and they'll say we need to save money. What's your goal? We need to save as much money as possible because we need to boost profits. Okay, so you're trying to boost profits, which is secondary to saving money. If you cancel your sales meeting or your incentive trip, chances are you're not giving your employees the bonuses that they have gotten in the past. They're not getting pay raises. They're not getting the commissions that they used to if sales are down. You need this team who is probably discouraged and isn't being paid as well as they have in years gone by to work harder and become more passionate in a time where they're getting fewer accolades, fewer reasons to celebrate, less money, less recognition. In canceling the sales meeting, you're not training that staff on how to deal with the current climate. You're not giving them we're all in the same boat and I support you. And now that the economy is tough, you helped us when times were good. I am here to help you when times are bad. This sales meeting is dedicated to what do I need to do to help you sell better and to help you be successful in your job. If you train your team in difficult times, they'll perform even better, especially when times are good again. If you cut the incentive trip, what motivation do they have to work harder for you? And the truth is, if that's the trend, then if all your competitors, you know that they're not training their sales staff and their sales team isn't going on incentives, and you're the company that does, it's easier for you to recruit talent, it's easier for you to keep talent, and you are going to excel where other people are now going to continue to lag behind because they're not investing in their sales team, they're not rewarding their sales team. You can't stop advertising when sales are down. That's when you need to, if anything, invest more. These are the people who are going to help change. How can you cut the funding to educate and motivate them? So I say to the CEO, you can save $350,000, but you're trying to make another $1 million this year. So you can save $350,000 and cancel the sales meeting, or we can host it and I can help you make that $1 million because our goal for the meeting will be to give them the tools that they need to sell in a difficult market. So would you rather save 350 or would you rather make your $1 million? And that helps.
Yeah, it does. And I think also too, the research has borne out that the companies that continued to meet during the economic downturn rebounded much faster, gained much more market share over their competitors. I think that's some stats that you can download from the Meetings Means Business Toolkit for Global Meetings Industry Day. Because I just saw it today. I was like, ooh, yeah. So what about when people call meetings a boondoggle or question the value of sending someone to a conference to get education or something like that?
I was just reading in the New York Times about a reporter who said, I'm very proud of myself because I was able to convince my boss to send me on a conference, and it was a tremendous amount of work because everyone knows that meetings are boondoggles. And this reporter was kind of patting themselves on the back, and it was as if they also believed that the event was a boondoggle, but attaboy because they convinced their boss to let them go and they pulled the wool over the boss's eyes. So, which infuriates me. And the truth is, anything can be abused. A car can be a vehicle to get you to or from work, or it can be a death trap if you drive it at 80 miles an hour and you're drunk. So a meeting can be a wonderful opportunity to network and to learn and to collaborate, or it can be a boondoggle. So the meeting is what the attendees make of it. So are meetings boondoggles for some people? Absolutely. But we, again, as planners, until we come together and have the ability so I wrote a letter to that writer and explained why that writer was incorrect. So until we, again, even if we have to do it one letter at a time and one person at a time, if someone says, and you're even in a dinner conversation and someone says, oh yeah, I was just out in Vegas, it was 4 days of drinking, and oh my gosh, it was a total party, I'll address that and say, shame on you. because your company, do you know how much it costs your company to send you there? You just wasted $5,000 of their dollars, and it's great that you had a good time, but you've come back and you've completely squandered an opportunity to have learned a lot. Did you get to shake hands with the CEO? Did you do any major networking? And what'd you get out of that 4 days of drinking? Shame on you. And it doesn't always make me popular, but until, again, we have the ability to say, this event is not a boondoggle. You have the ability to meet with XYZ. The CEO is going to be there. Industry leaders are going to be there. So-and-so is speaking. Here's master sessions that you're going to have. You're going to get out of your office and your environment so that you can even just mentally recalibrate, regardless of what else you do when you get there, so that you completely shift your frame of reference, and you're surrounded by people who hopefully are going to challenge you to do a better job, because the guy you're sitting next to has got, twice the title, twice the earning power, twice the sales. Or I'm really good at my job and I'm surrounded by people who, I'll be darned, want to be me. So it's time for me to step up and be a mentor to my peers who I don't get to see all the time. Meetings can be phenomenal opportunities. If it's a boondoggle, then that's incumbent upon the person who squandered the opportunity, not on the people who arranged the meetings. So that's my response.
That's a great one. And you can tell that it's a pretty widespread problem, because it doesn't matter if it's a small event like a PYM Live or a larger event like the WEC, all of the event organizers put together a Convince Your Boss toolkit. So it really feels like, if you want your employees to be able to perform to the best of their ability, if you want them to be the best versions of themselves and to be able to work more efficiently and be more productive, they need to invest in consistent training. And if you have to be convincing them of the value of leaving for an afternoon, or joining an association that can provide you on-demand education, or going for several days, it's a very interesting disconnect that I see happening. I like, there's a new trend in HR that I see happening where they give employees kind of an education stipend so that they can, take a certain amount of funds every year to reinvest in their education. I think that's very smart, especially since 5 years ago, if you graduate with a college degree, there's probably things happening in the workforce. Like you'll be working at jobs that you never trained for. I know that I'm doing things that there was no schooling for when I was in college, because the technology just didn't exist. So if you're always learning what you're doing on the job, if there's always new things that are happening, you have to constantly be reinvesting in your professional development. And knowing how to communicate the importance of committing yourself to that is incredibly important. So thank you for those insights.
You're welcome.
So what happens when we read some kind of news report that says, oh, these people at the GSA, they paid $28 for a muffin, when it turned out to be like a continental breakfast package per person, which included coffee and everything else? What can we do as meeting professionals to counter that kind of misinformation and just sloppy journalism when we see it?
It's a great question. And again, I keep going back to this, and you had started by saying, I want to be the face of the meetings industry. What I want to be is the person who allows everyone to be the face of the meeting industry, so that when something like that happens again, when Bill O'Reilly went bananas on that and was talking about how could this be, and you should have seen me dialing the phone to try and get to talk to him. And it's when someone says that, and I have the ability to say, you know what, I agree that $28 for breakfast is ridiculous. And yes, you're right. You can go to Starbucks and get a muffin and coffee for $6. But what's really fascinating is, and this, hand to God, coffee is right now $180 a gallon in San Francisco. I was just at a hotel in San Francisco, and I paid $180 after the plus plus for coffee. My bottles of water were $12.80 after the plus plus, and they weren't full-size bottles. So what I will explain to people is, you are right. That is an outrageous amount of money to pay for breakfast. The reality is, we are not by law allowed to bring outside food into a hotel because of a hotel's cost, because they have contracts and salaries that they need to adhere to. If it's a union hotel, they need to charge X amount of dollars to cover what those employees need to make. You're right. I would love to not pay $28. However, you need to take that fight to people outside of the industry because I'm a victim of the prices that I have to pay, and I need to have my meetings in hotels. I agree with you, to whoever you're arguing. It's ridiculous. However, because that's what the market will bear and that's what the price is from the hotels, I'm willing to join that fight with you. The issue is how much I'm paying. So help me figure out how to get the hotels to lower their prices. I'm totally with you. And you can join them in their passion. You just have to shift the focus from, I'm the victim. So I appreciate your passion. Help me fight this argument. And how do we make the hotels bring their prices down? So I grasp onto their passion and say to them, okay, good, we feel the same way. Help me fight the beast. And they can't, but at least it gets their attention from me being the person who's wasting money to, oh my gosh, they really rake you over the coals. And then again, it kind of takes the air out of their sails.
Do you think that the people who kind of got thrust into the spotlight, the only one that I really saw kind of fight back was Texas Roadhouse when all this media coverage was happening. Do you think it was like an internal pressure not to say anything, or do you feel like they said things but the media just didn't care about it? Or why are things that are not true being reported and people not coming forward or being heard when they're presenting what's actually accurate?
Personally, I think, and again, when you first started this conversation, it was the industry is fragmented. We argue amongst ourselves. I'm an association planner, which makes me better or not as good as a corporate planner, which makes me better or worse than an admin who's planning it. We as an industry are arguing with each other internally. Forget within your own department where there are 6 planners at the same level and each one is vying for the next bigger event because we're trying to do our own land grab within our own organizations. We as planners are control freaks. So we all want to be the best. We all want to, be the most important. We can't stop fighting with each other long enough to realize that we need to band together and disabuse the world of the notion that, we're party planners or boondoggles and wasting money. But the other thing is, when the media goes after someone, first of all, I don't believe most of the time that they're strategic enough to know how to fight back or they have the vocabulary that I'm trying to share with people. But if I respond and the preponderance of evidence is that I'm simply defending myself because I've been caught, why would the media cover that? Until it is understood that I'm not just defending myself, I'm educating you because actually the anomaly is that you think that this was a mistake as opposed to what I'm doing is fine and no one understands it. Until there's that paradigm shift, no one's going to run to our defense and no one's going to believe us. Of course, if you're guilty, you're going to defend yourself. So they just look like their hand got slapped, so they're defending themselves, but no one believes them because it's not a story you hear often enough. And, again, until we as an industry decide we are going to change that, we are going to continue to have these problems, not get raises, be the first ones to get laid off, have our bosses cancel meetings halfway through planning them, understaffed, underpaid, and we go home and we complain. Take that energy, help me change it. We can. We plan everything. Why can't we plan our own futures? And we're not. We're too busy worried about logistics. Logistics don't matter. Strategy does.
So that brought up 2 things. The first thing was the first element that we talked about during this video, which is how important it is to explain what it is that you do to your friends and to your family and to your coworkers and to your boss, and to be strategic about your meetings. Because then when things get criticized, it's going to be your boss or your coworkers or your friends or your family when people get outraged and up in arms and say, actually, this is how things are. That's a very inaccurate story. And so it really does start with you. And I think the other thing that you mentioned is that we're really fantastic at planning out the details for everything except for our own futures. So we have a couple more minutes left. I wanted to remind people who are viewing that if you do have questions or comments, you can tweet at PYM Live, hashtag GMID16 because it's Global Meetings Industry Day, or use the Q&A app to enter in some questions, and that we can continue the conversation even after this ends. So Christy, advice on how we can get better at planning our own futures.
I think everyone needs to practice. So if you go home and say to your husband, your wife, your best friend, whomever, describe to me what I do for a living. If they can't, then you have not been your own spokesperson or your own advocate well enough. and you need to learn to create the vocabulary to explain what it is that you do. So if the people in your world don't understand what you do, they can't be your advocate. That means you're not taking the time to clearly articulate it. So practice on the people in your world. Go home, and when you're out on Friday night, say to your girlfriend, whoever you're having dinner with, what do I do for a living? And they say, you travel, you plan parties. But what does that mean? What is that? And they don't know. So practice on them and start to become an advocate. Every conversation you have is the opportunity to have that conversation. Every single person you educate is one step closer to things changing. And it's our job to do that. We have to, unless we want to be obsolete. And did you ask, what was the second part?
No, just about planning our own futures. You know, I know one thing that you're really passionate about is financial planning for planners, because a lot of times, especially, you know, if you've been in the corporate world for a long time or the association world, you may decide at a certain point to go off and be an independent. And then you have to worry about, you don't have a pension that comes with that. And how are you going to take care of yourself when you age out of the industry? So do you have some advice? Because I know, especially with the baby boomer population, this is a real concern with a lot of people in the industry. And so it's causing a lot of stress and anxiety.
Understood. And again, for me, for the people who hire me, or when I was in corporate America, I commanded a very respectable salary because I got a seat at the table and I was considered an integral part of the company's executive team, as well as their being responsible for their financial well-being. So they conferred with me before big decisions were made as to, we're thinking about doing this meeting. This is what our marketing strategy is. What can you do to support that? And I was paid commensurate with the value that I brought to the organization. But until I demonstrated to them all the things that I could do, I wasn't paid particularly well. The other thing is, you need to, if you can create a case for what you're doing and say, you're paying me X, and I'm a contract negotiator, I'm doing this, this is actually industry scale for what I'm doing, and stand up for yourself. That also helps. I had my salary doubled when I was in my 20s because I went to my boss and said, this is my job description and it's 3 other jobs and this is what I'm making. Doubled my salary. The worst they can say is no. If we're afraid to even make the ask, then we have failed. This is something we could talk about for days and days and days to come. So let's do this again soon.
We will. Yeah. And I just wanted to remind people that the conversation doesn't have to end. Unfortunately, our broadcast does. Christy, can you tell people how to get in touch with you and how to stay in touch with you and where they can find some of the other things that you've written or where you might be teaching?
Sure. So Plan Your Meetings has been a wonderful spokesperson for me. So if you go to Plan Your Meetings and you search my name, you'll see a 6-part story on financial planning, a multi-part series on goal setting. You can follow me on Twitter at SME or if you reach out to Christy, she will tell you how to find this Christy's email address. And I love to share my templates, my tools, everything I have, I make available to folks. So if you reach out for Christy, you can then get in touch with me and I'll share anything that you need.
Thank you. Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll put those links and her Twitter, and I'll spell out the email so that you don't get spam botted. So if you want to get in touch with Christy, that'll be an easy way for you to find it. It'll be in the body of this event invitation and also in the description of the video. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us. If you were shy and you have questions that you wake up in the middle of the night and think about, oh, I wanted to ask this because you're reflective, or if you're watching this on demand and didn't get to catch us live, you can tweet at PYM Live, and I will get that and I will respond to you. Hashtag GMID16 is a great hashtag to search and see what else is happening. There are events happening all over the world, being done by all sorts of associations. And so I think that this message of unity is one that I would love to see continued throughout the meetings industry. I would love to see an end to the fighting and the carping and the this and the that. And, so I just wanted to let you know that whether you plan parties or conventions or trade shows or training seminars or sales incentive trips, or you are called a meeting executive, or you have no title at all, but you're just in this industry, whether you're in charge of hotels or restaurants or meeting spaces, if you are somebody who does corporate entertainment, whatever it is, however you touch this industry, Plan Your Meetings loves you, MPI loves you, and we're really looking forward to figuring out how we can speak in one voice so we can move the entire industry forward. So thank you so much for joining us for Global Meetings Industry Day. This is Christy Casey Sanders. I am going to sign off. Plan well and prosper, my friends, and may the planning forces be with you.